Thanks.
Morning. Another day. Another real world test. Today, we're doing on the iPhone 13 Pro Max. And if you aren't familiar, I'm going to go through my normal day. We're going to take some photos on the phone and some of its competitors, put those up on the screen so you can see how those do. We'll check in on the battery by the end of the day. And we'll talk about some of the features that I like and don't like, all while exploring a new hood. Today, though, we are no longer in New York, in case that whole montage before this didn't make that clear. We're in Los Angeles, and I'll explain why in a bit, but first things first. Coffee. Check. Okay, real quick. When people say LA, it can be kind of confusing. You see, there's Los Angeles, the city, inside Los Angeles, the county, and people sort of use the name LA or Los Angeles interchangeably for both, only getting more specific when necessary. So right now we are here in the city of Santa Monica on the water here in the county of LA, and it is surrounded on all sides besides the ocean by the city of LA. LA, the city's map, is one of the weirdest looking maps I think I've ever seen of any US city. And since all of the other cities in this county are bleeding together for the most part, it's hard to tell where one begins and another ends to anyone who's not a local. Now, I'm here because of a MediaTek event that's happening this week in the city of Laguna Beach, which is an hour south of here. But it's kind of become a tradition for me and a friend of mine, another YouTuber that you might know, to come to LA right before a couple of these different events that happen around this time of year, just to kind of catch up and see some of our other friends that live here. Now, he's currently out with one of those other friends right now while I have to get some work done here at this cafe that has kind of become our unofficial spot to work at every time we do these trips. And it's called Espresso Cielo, and it's a chill little spot. They make good lattes. They have food on certain days of the week that's pretty good. It works out. And while we're here though, let's talk about the design of the iPhone 13 Pro Max. Now, I apologize to anyone who watched my iPhone 13 Pro video, as there's gonna be some overlap, obviously. So firstly, the shape and feel is very similar to the iPhone 12 series. We have the same flat edges, which are probably here because of the millimeter wave 5G antenna that's inside the device nowadays, and it reminds me of the 4. So just like with the iPhone 12 series, I like the iPhone 13 series' design too. Now, the two Pro devices have a similar frosted glass back compared to the glossy ones of the non-Pro iPhone 13s, just like the iPhone 12 Pros versus the 12s. And just like those as well, we have stainless steel body on the Pro models compared to the aluminum of the 13. And we have 4 colors, with the Sierra blue color, which is what I have here for my iPhone 13 Pro Max, being the new color this year. The notch is now 20% smaller, which is always welcome. And we have larger cameras on the back compared to last year's Pro models. And of course, a third telephoto camera on the Pro models compared to the 2 cameras on the non-Pro models. And of course, there are still no chargers in the box. But that's where today's sponsor comes in. Spigen. Spigen is a MagSafe charger capable of fast charging your iPhone 13 or iPhone 12 in less time than Apple's own MagSafe charger. In addition to these, they have new gallium nitride charging bricks that use the newer gallium nitride element, which allows electrical current to pass through it faster, so it's more efficient, produces less heat, and can be put into smaller chargers while still having these high charging speeds. The Spigen ArcStation Pro charger comes in a USB-C 20-watt version that can charge your iPhone 3.1 times faster than the normal iPhone charger, and yet it's just about as small. They also have a new dual USB-C 40-watt charger capable of fast charging 2 iPhones at the same time, or even 2 MagSafe devices if you wanted. The chargers also reduce ripple noise, a common cause for damaging devices from other chargers, as well as just shortening the lifespan of your devices. So you can be sure it'll fast charge your device with higher efficiency while reducing damage that could happen to your device and keeping it having a longer lifespan. Check out Spigen's chargers at the links below, and thanks again to Spigen for sponsoring this video. this is the Santa Monica Pier, and it's actually two piers that have been joined together and for a long time had separate owners. The long, skinny municipal pier opened in 1909 and was just used to basically carry sewage pipes out far enough offshore, and the Pleasure Pier, which was shorter and built in 1916, which was adjacent to it. And it was basically a small amusement park, which is now more or less what it resembles today, with a roller coaster, arcade, Ferris wheel, and even the original carousel from the original Pleasure Pier is still here. And it in the building that it is now inside of was made into a National Historic Monument in 1987. And now it's just a really interesting place to watch the sunset. There's a lot of like street performers and people selling stuff, and there's some restaurants, there's an arcade. Basically reminds me of like a really tiny Coney Island. It's got that same vibe. But while we're here, let's talk about the screens on this phone. The screens on the new 13 series are very similar to the 12 series, with HDR10 and Dolby Vision support, as well as 1200 nits of peak brightness that only triggers when you're watching HDR content. This year now though, the 800 nits of sustained brightness from the iPhone 12 series is the same on the iPhone 13 and 13 mini. But the 13 Pro and 13 Pro Max now all have 1000 nits, so they're 25% brighter or so. Honestly though, you'd have a hard time noticing a difference on a day-to-day basis between the 12 and the 13. All of them, the 13s, the 13 Pros, the 12s, they're all bright enough to be seen in broad daylight, even in this bright California sun, and that's all that I really care about. The other difference we have this year that is also only on the Pro models is what Apple calls ProMotion, which means that they support up to 120 Hz refresh rates. Now this means that they can refresh what's on the screen up to 120 times a second. What this does is it just makes animations and gaming and anything with a lot of movement look and feel a bit smoother. Now honestly, I feel like I noticed this more on 120 Hz displays on Android than I do on iOS for some reason, but it is a nice addition to the iPhones, even if it is a little subtle. There he is, Super Saf.
Hey,
How many years have we been coming here?
it's been a long time. This is like the
3 or 4.
It's been 4 years, but this is the third time because last year was last year was cancelled. Everything was cancelled.
True, pandemic. But yes,
Good place.
4
to be.
years, but 3 years we've done this.
We've done this. It would have been 4 years in a row if it wasn't, but it's a tradition now.
Yeah.
We're gonna be old men with grey hair. We'll be like,
Hanging out in LA.
we're still doing this. We'll see. We'll see.
Deal. All right, I'm gonna run upstairs real quick and get a coat
Yeah.
because it's way colder here than I thought it was gonna
It
be.
definitely is.
And then dinner.
Let's do it.
Funny enough, Saf had his first ever sushi with me and a few of our other friends in Hawaii, and he hated it.
I wouldn't say I hate it, but okay, so here's the story, right? We were in LA for the first time, and Kogan's really good at finding places to eat, and every single day we were eating halal food. So on the last day, I was like, Kogan,
It was good though.
let's eat wherever you want to eat. And he's like, oh, I like sushi. And I'm like, oh, bloody hell. Why did I give this guy the option?
Your fault.
But then we couldn't do it, so we went to Hawaii and then we had sushi. It was okay.
But
Oh, here we are again.
But this is where I wanted to take
This
you.
is the best
originally.
sushi though, so yeah,
All right, so you can give it another chance, yeah?
let's do it.
You can already tell that I don't know what I'm doing. All right, let's give it a try, Saf. Go ahead. Round 2. How bad? Eh? Good. Is it good? Do you mean that? I'll take it. He's a good sport. So this is Sugarfish, and it's basically a famous sushi place that started here in LA, and it's taken off. I remember when the New York City location opened a few years back and I tried to go, and it had a 4-hour wait. People were complaining that they could almost get to LA and go to one of these original Sugarfish locations here in that time. It's honestly just really good sushi and not expensive, so no wonder it's packed every night. Okay, let's talk about the cameras. So unlike last year, where the 12 Pro Max had its own special top tier camera compared to the rest of the lineup, we have the same exact cameras for the 13 Pro and the 13 Pro Max. The iPhone 12 Pro Max camera is now in both the 13 and 13 mini basically, but the Pro and Pro Max have an even larger 0.606 inch sensor with larger 1.9 micron sized pixels, which just means that it'll let in more light and also means that we have more natural bokeh when taking photos close up of things, the blurred background that you see. Now, besides that, we have our ultra wide camera that is similar to the 13 and 13 mini, but has a slightly faster aperture at f1.8 versus the f2.4, so it should also have a bit more bokeh and let in more light than those technically. And for the third camera that is only on the 13 Pro and 13 Pro Max, we have a 3 times telephoto instead of the 2.5 times that we had on the 12 Pro Max and the 2 times on the 12 Pro. Personally, I like that it's 3 times, as I've always kind of said that 2 times doesn't quite give me enough of a different focal length, so 3 times feels a lot more useful. Now, throughout this video, you can see how they perform. But the interesting thing here is that because the cameras are identical to the 13 Pro, again, unlike last year, that means you no longer have to go for the largest iPhone to get the top specs. You can literally just choose between screen sizes that you prefer, and the Pro Max is larger. Better.
So I've never been in a place where all of the lights turn red and the crosswalks all go at the same time, and people just cross in the middle of the street diagonally. I mean, I like it. It's efficient, right? Have you ever been anywhere else that's done that?
Nope.
It's weird.
This is the 3rd Street Promenade. Essentially, it's an outdoor mall, and it's a little touristy. But occasionally, you can find fun performances like people just all salsa dancing in the street, and there's some fun food spots like this taiyaki place that we went to called Somi Somi, which is a baked fish-shaped waffle cone with a filling like custard inside, and then soft serve ice cream. No idea why it's a fish, but it's delicious. Now, Apple also added in some new camera features, like cinematic mode, which is basically video portrait mode, where it uses software to blur out the background and mimic bokeh. And while it does work better than any other video bokeh modes that I've seen, and it also allows you to change the focus and the amount of blur even after you record, which is actually pretty useful, I just still prefer the look of the normal video, which again is some natural bokeh because of the larger sensor, and would rather have less and natural than more and kind of just a bit off looking to my eyes at least. Now I will say that the ability to rack the focus, as in move it from one subject to another by tapping on them and then it blurs everything else out, is cool. And kind of wish that there was just like a similar way to do that in the regular video camera actually.
Speaking of video, something that I couldn't test in my iPhone 13 Pro video was ProRes, because it wasn't out yet, but now it is.
Now, this is basically a more professional format for video recording, but I can tell you right now that shooting video in ProRes versus regular video on the iPhone 13 Pro and Pro Max, the only 2 in the series that can shoot in the format, if you just pulled them right out of the phone, you'd be hard pressed to tell any difference. And it uses 30 times more storage, which is why Apple, in Apple fashion, won't let you record 4K ProRes on the 128 gig model, which is what I have here and why I've been recording in 1080p. You'd have to buy a 256 gig model or higher to unlock that. Now, where ProRes might actually be worth it is in more challenging lighting conditions, when you plan to also actually edit the footage. You'll notice it'll have a little bit more details in the shadows and more dynamic range, if only by a bit. So if you wanted to squeeze image quality out of it and are going to take the time to edit every shot, then maybe it's worth shooting in that format. Otherwise, it probably isn't worth the storage. For photos, they added creative modes, which are similar to filters, but more like LUTs if you're familiar with those, and there are a few to choose from. The more interesting thing here, though, is that you can customize any of these, so that if there is a specific look you like, you can then kind of set that and swap to it every time pretty easily to get an image out of the phone that you might like better than the stock images without having to edit it after the fact. And lastly, we have macro mode, which allows you to get closer up shots within centimeters using the ultra wide camera. Personally, I don't think anyone will probably use it very much after the initial novelty wears off. And I will say though that along with the ProRes update we got, Apple also added a way to turn off the auto switching to macro that annoyed the crap out of me before. It would always just switch to macro when I didn't want it to, and it drove me insane. Now though, you can turn it off, and if I want macro, again, I basically don't ever use it, but if I did, I can just manually switch to the ultra wide camera and use it there.
sir. I'll see you in the morning. We have to go to our event. Oh, you're sleeping in the hall tonight. Oh, night.
Okay, calling it a night. And it is 9:41 p.m. I took it off the charger about 8 a.m. and we are at 27%. And here's my screen on time and my usage for anyone who's curious about that. And obviously today was a day that is not normal. I filmed a ton on this phone. And honestly, the montage you saw in the beginning, that was last night, so I charged the phone overnight, so none of that counts. But everything else I did today is still a lot, and that's still a decent amount of battery. But here is another day that is not a real world test, so you can just see the usage for that to compare. Now, honestly, the 12 Pro Max was a crazy battery life device, frankly. This, I want to say, has more battery life than that, and that's kind of cool. So really the only thing you have to think about when deciding between the Pro Max and the Pro is the screen size and just how much of a battery monster this one is. But honestly, the 13 Pro did a really good job too. I'll leave a link below to my video on that if you want to check that out. So yeah, it's just like, do you want the bigger phone with like crazy battery life, or do you want the smaller phone with still very good battery life? There you go. Let me know in the comments below what you guys thought of this video, of this phone. Always appreciate hearing from you guys. As always though, regardless, thanks for watching. Doesn't matter where I go. Loud sounds. I don't even know what that is. Sounds like a drill. On a pier, they're drilling something. Cool.